Bang! Neeves knives. I'm Jared. My lovely wife Kara's busy, and today we are talking about some knife sharpening tips that I wanted to add in. So I have a lot of knife sharpening content and a lot more knife sharpening content coming up this week. But this is just a couple little things I wanted to talk about, just, to kind of fill in some gaps. I'm trying to hit as many topics and areas about knife sharpening as possible in the next week or 2 weeks. But this one is just a couple little random things. So one, I just want to say that it doesn't matter if you freehand, if you use an electric sharpener, if you use a KME, a fixed angle system, it doesn't matter as long as you have a sharp knife. That's what's important. But I do, however, think that freehanding is much more rewarding. It's very therapeutic. And, you don't have to have a system. You can literally just have one stone and get a good sharp edge. You can be out hunting and get a sharp edge. But if you never learn how to freehand, you can't do that. And, you could be on a job site with no power or anything like that and still get a sharp edge when you understand freehanding. It does take more time to learn and a little bit more effort, but once you do learn it, it's much, much more rewarding, in my opinion. Now, this is a tri-stone. It's a 3-stone. It's called a tri-stone. You flip to the next stone. This stone would be, this stone would be on the coarse, and then this one would be the medium. They don't normally come off. I removed mine, so that's a tri-stone. I do have some linked below if you're interested. This version, this exact one, has 2 aluminum oxides. Basically an aluminum oxide, an India, and then a hard Arkansas. I have one down in the description that has a diamond, then an aluminum oxide, and then an Arkansas. There are lots of different versions of these, but they're relatively cheap. Smith makes good stones. They have good cuts of Arkansas stones, and they make good quality aluminum oxide stones for a very good price. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is pressure. So I get asked that a lot. How much pressure do you put? Well, that's going to be based upon what kind of stones you're using. So if you're using diamond, anything diamond, whether it's a diamond plate or Neeves or any type of diamond, you're not going to want to use pressure. You're going to want to use as much pressure. Imagine if this is diamond, as much pressure as it takes to hold your angle and slide it across the stone without changing angle. So you're not like using no pressure at all where you're just going like that. You're not doing that, but you want to get your knife in a good grip, set your angle, and then basically scrape the top of the stone off as if you're scraping a thin layer of the stone off. Now, but you don't want to put pressure with diamonds. And the reason why is diamonds are so hard and they're so sharp already that they are going to bite and remove the steel regardless of the pressure. And the more pressure you put, the more deeper the gouges are going to be. So then when you go to the next stone, it'll take longer. And also, since they cut so fast, you don't want to make a mistake. You want to watch it, the process go along. You want to keep checking your edge and looking and stuff like that. But the deeper the gouges you put, the harder they're going to be to remove on the next grit. So remember that. And then the more time you take and the more patience you have, the faster it will go. Now, if you're using aluminum oxide, like something like this, you're going to want to put a little bit of pressure, but not a lot. You still want to let the stone do the work. So the reason why you'll put a little bit more pressure on something like this is just because it's kind of hard to explain, but the coarseness of the stone, or the texture of the stone, is a little different. Yes, it's very jagged when you when you look at it on a microscopic level, but it's not as hard as a diamond. So, but you're basically doing the same thing, set your angle, and you want to put as much pressure as it takes to drag it across the stone with that angle, and possibly just a little bit extra. Now, you don't have to put much pressure. It's basically no pressure because you're letting the stone do the work. But you can add a little bit of pressure. Now, the thing with adding pressure is that sometimes when you add pressure, you can't feel the little tiny movements like what I just did right there. I'm going to do it again. Those little tiny movements you can't feel when you're doing pressure. But when you're using the same amount of pressure, light pressure, you can feel those little tiny movements more. So you want to be able to identify every little movement you're making, even on a very small level. So by putting pressure, you are going to rock and not realize it. So, basically let the stone do the cutting, not much pressure. It's hard for me to say how many pounds or anything like that. That's why I say find your angle and use as much pressure as it takes for you to hold that angle and scrape the top of the stone. That's how much pressure you want to make. Now, with natural stones, it's kind of like aluminum oxide, but you're basically going to do the same thing. You want to let the stones do the work. Now, you can add a little bit more pressure with a natural stone, especially if you're on a finishing stone. Now, towards the end of the work on the finishing stone, you want to use lighter and lighter pressure. Kind of like with a lot of the other stones, even if I'm on a diamond, I'm going to, like say if I'm coming off of a diamond finishing stone, I'm going to also use lighter and lighter pressure, as I finish. But when you first get on a natural stone, you can put a little bit of pressure. You just don't want to put that much. Now, if you have a lot of steel to remove and you're jumping on aluminum oxide, you can, put a little bit more pressure right off the bat, but you're also doing more damage to the stone. Like a diamond stone, another reason why you don't want to put pressure is because those diamonds can get knocked off, and you want the diamonds to cut the steel, and if you knock them off and they're gone, then they can't cut the steel. The less pressure you put, the more likely you have of those diamonds staying embedded onto the plate, and less likely of them getting knocked off. So, that's another reason, but yeah. But with natural stones like Arkansas stones or any natural stone, you can add a little bit of pressure, just not a lot. Like I said, just still make sure you're able to hold your angle and don't put too much pressure, because like I said, then you'll be rocking all over the place and not realizing it. So as much pressure as your body can handle, which shouldn't be much pressure, and be able to hold that angle. Now, a stone you are going to have to use pressure on is a ceramic stone. So if you have Spider Coast ceramics, whatever type of ceramic stone, those do require pressure. So that's where they could be a little tricky to use, because you have to use pressure to use them. So like right now I'm pushing pressure and also keep that angle. So you have to be able to identify those little tiny movements. Now, if you're not worried about convexing your edge, then it might not be that big of a deal that you're making little subtle movements. But if you're wanting an absolute V grind, then you're going to want to definitely be, be careful of how you're moving and rocking and stuff by still keeping pressure. Now, lucky ceramic stones kind of tell you, once you're used to using them, they kind of let you know when you're off an angle, but it does take some time to learn that. Now, Other stones, like certain water stones and stuff like that, they might require a little bit more pressure, certain water stones or certain slash and go stones, but you got to be careful with them, because if you do rock forward or something like that and not realize it, you'll gouge the stone. These are very hard stones, so you won't do that, but like super stones and stuff like that, they're a little softer, so you can definitely gouge them. But with most stones, you want to let the stone do the work, not too much pressure, unless if it's a ceramic stone. Now, time. How much time should you spend on the stone? Now, that is one thing, one area where I want you to throw time out the window, because time makes you feel like that you're not going fast enough or you're going too slow or anything like that. There are so many variables that time shouldn't matter. It's like kind of like if I'm sharpening this knife versus this knife, they're going to be completely different. And not just because of size, because of thickness. The thickness behind the edge is completely different. The angle of the bevel might be different that I'm going to use between this knife and this knife. So time shouldn't matter. You shouldn't worry about how long you're going to sharpen or how much time it's going to take. What you should be worried about is the process itself. The grip pattern. Have I hit, have I hit like the entire edge? Am I missing any areas? Is my grit completely covering the entire edge? Is there little spots that I missed? That stuff is what you should be worried about. And if you have missed any areas and if you haven't hit them yet, even if you've been going on that stone for a long time, you're not done yet. So the time's not over. And the more work you can get done with your first stone, the easier the rest of the stones will be. A lot of people like to rush and get to the next stone because they feel like like they've been on a certain stone for too long. Get that out of your mind. Get that out of your head. The first stone most likely is going to take the longest time. I don't care if it's been an hour. Don't think about the time. Concentrate on the edge and the quality of the edge and your grip pattern. And obviously your bevel and angle and all that stuff. Now in the beginning, most likely you're going to remove more steel than you probably need to because your burrs are going to be bigger. It's going to be harder for you to identify burrs, or you're going to mess up a little bit and you're going to want to fix it and stuff like that. It's not a big deal. That's why when you first begin, don't do it on an expensive knife you love and you don't want to mess up. Do it on a knife you don't really worry about messing up. Get that work in there and don't worry about failure. Failure is a good thing because failure helps you learn your mistakes and what you're doing wrong. You can never learn how to do it right without doing it wrong. You can't learn the mistakes not to do without doing them first. So without putting the steel to the stone and really feeling it and seeing the differences on what this does and what that does, with yourself, yeah, you can watch these videos and they're going to help a lot. I mean, a lot, but there's going to be little tiny nuances and little things that you're going to do that you're going to have to fix yourself. Like rocking and, lifting up when you're going across the stone or possibly whatever it's going to be. So, don't be afraid to fail a little bit. That's actually a good thing. Also, if you're worried about scratching, sometimes you'll slip and you'll let the knife go across the stone by accident, or maybe you keep hitting the, like right here on your titanium or G10, you keep hitting or whatever. Don't be scared to tape off. Tape off the blade. Only let the edge expose. Tape off the handle. Tape off areas you're worried about hitting, especially if you're like with a titanium or an aluminum knife. That if you bump the stone with the titanium or aluminum, it's going to scratch the surface. So, tape it off. It's not a big deal. I still tape knives off that aren't mine sometimes. It's not a big deal. It's a good thing. And then when you do accidentally bump it because you're rushing, that's the thing, is usually it happens because you're rushing. Don't rush. You don't want to come off the stone aggressively or pound the handle into the stone, but just because you're getting motor skills, new motor skills, tape it off. But that's basically all I wanted to talk about in this video. I have a lot more sharpening videos coming up. I just wanted to hit a couple little questions that I get asked from time to time. And if you are interested in any other questions, feel free to ask them down below. I do have lots of other sharpening videos that might already have answered it, but it's okay. And if there's any questions that you have that you'd like to see me do videos on, make them down in the comments. And if I haven't made it already, or maybe I'll possibly just make a new one, because it doesn't hurt to have multiple videos on one subject. So leave them down in the comments. I love you guys. Peace.